They modify, perhaps might even be suggested, one's consciousness. It begins to change a person, the use of these drugs. Drugs like DMT, we've talked about them on this program before. I believe that mind-altering drugs are made illegal in this country and other Western countries because they tend to change people's minds. They take people, it is suggested or believed, away from productivity. And in our economy, in our country, we want to be productive, don't we? And that's the basis, I believe, of these laws against these drugs. Now, it may not be widely known, or perhaps it is, but Graham has experimented rather extensively with a number of these drugs. Tell us about it, Graham.
Yes, well, let me preface that remark by saying something, and you're right. I mean, what we're going to talk about now will anger a lot of people because, unfortunately, in our society, we have been conditioned by a kind of mind control program, a very sinister and a very dark mind control program. And part of this mind control program is the so-called war on drugs, so that most of us have grown up unable to think freely and independently about such issue. We hear the word drug, and we automatically assume that it's a bad thing. And if we're to say anything good about drugs, then immediately we arouse instinctive, instant anger from millions of our fellow citizens.
Evil,
yes. And what we have to, what we have to understand is that this comes from an extremely clever and skillful program that has manipulated us into ways of thinking that may be contrary to our own interests, but beneficial to the interests of the powers that be, beneficial to the interests of those who control our lives, who tax us until we have hardly a penny left to spend, and who take our money and plow it into the creation of huge armed bureaucracies which exist to oppress us. I'd like to say at the outset, I do have very strong views on this issue, and I think it's outrageous in a supposedly free society after 2,000 years of progress towards so-called democracy that we live in a society today where we may not make the decision as adults privately in our own homes, doing no harm to others. We are not allowed to make the decision to explore our own consciousness through the use of ancient and sacred plants that have been used in shamanistic cultures for tens of thousands of years. If I am not sovereign over my own consciousness, then I am sovereign over nothing. And it's an absurd joke to talk about democracy and the wonders of democracy when I live in a society that will not allow me to explore my own mind using tools and techniques that have been used by mankind for tens of thousands of years. But that is the society that we live in today. And rather than being outraged and angry about this, we've been lulled into a sense of security, a false security. We've been told that our governments are acting in our interest to protect and preserve our health, when in fact what they're doing is infringing on the very essence of ourselves, upon our consciousness. I'm not here to advocate drugs. I know that many drugs are harmful and dangerous, but I am here to advocate adult personal responsibility. And unfortunately, we now live in a society where adults are not allowed to take responsibility for their own lives, where bureaucrats and social workers interfere with our lives in every way and tell us what we may or may not do, and even enter the inner sanctum of our own consciousness and tell us what we do there. And it's utterly disgusting to me that we live in a society that can throw, as I said earlier, 24-hour a day, completely meaningless and mindless television at us, which of course is affecting our consciousness in all sorts of negative ways, and that is okay, but that we may not experiment with ancient and sacred plants such as peyote, such as the ayahuasca brew from South America, such as iboga from Central Africa, which have been used in shamanistic ceremonies to explore the supernatural realm for tens of thousands of years. Something terrible has gone wrong with the society we live in, and our own money, our own tax dollars, are being turned against us, funding huge armed bureaucracies that may enter our homes, that may deprive us of our property, that may put us in jail, not because we did any harm to anybody else, but simply because we chose to explore our own consciousness. And I think any right-thinking citizen, any free-thinking individual should be outraged and should shout with anger at what is happening to us today and about how this is being allowed to continue.
All right, then straight out, you have experimented with these drugs rather extensively. What?
I have. I found that I needed to do so in order to research and write my book, Supernatural.
And having done so?
Having done so, I can honestly say that it has changed my life, that it has transformed the direction of my life. Now, I'm not talking about heroin or cocaine. I've never taken cocaine in my life. I have no interest in doing so. I'm not going to put down anybody who does, but personally, that's not for me. I'm not interested in something that doesn't expand my consciousness, and I don't believe that cocaine does that. I'm not interested in addictive drugs. I don't want to become hooked and dependent on some substance. But what I'm interested in is certain plants that have been regarded as sacred, as teachers of mankind down the ages by shamans in tribal and hunter-gatherer societies. And amongst those plants, I'm most particularly interested in a brew, a drink that is prepared in the Amazon. We have archaeological evidence of the use of this brew. It's called ayahuasca. It means the vine of souls. Archaeological evidence of its use going back more than 3,000 years in the Amazon. It's probably much older than that. It's a combination of two different plants. One of them is a vine, the ayahuasca vine, and the other are the leaves of a bush, and the bush is called chacruna in the Amazon, and its botanical name is Psychotria viridis. And these leaves contain large quantities of the potent and, in this society, illegal hallucinogen called DMT, dimethyltryptamine. Now, the interesting thing about DMT, and again, I want to emphasize to your audience that none of these hallucinogenic substances are addictive in any way. It's impossible to become addicted to them. That DMT can be taken and effective in the human body by smoking it or, in fact, by injecting it. And it produces a very short 12-minute journey into other realms. But it cannot be normally absorbed orally. So that leaf that I told you about, the Psychotria viridis bush from the Amazon, you could sit down and munch your way through 1,000 leaves from that bush, or you could brew them up into a tea and drink them, and it wouldn't have any effect on you whatsoever. And that's because there's an enzyme in our stomachs, monoamine oxidase, which actually destroys DMT.
However, having done it properly, can you describe the experience?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add that the other ingredient, the vine, contains chemicals that switch off that enzyme in our stomach, and part of the mystery is how the shamans of the Amazon, out of 150,000 different species of plants and trees, ever managed to find these two plants that put together will give us a 4-hour journey into supernatural realms, and that is what the experience of ayahuasca is. An extraordinary storm of visions is unleashed behind your eyes. You find yourself leaving this world behind and moving on a journey into a seamlessly convincing parallel universe, a universe that is inhabited by intelligent beings. And indeed, one being in particular, who almost everybody who drinks ayahuasca, it doesn't matter where they come from. They might come from a great city in the West. They might come from the Amazon jungle. They will meet this being. She is always recognized as a female spirit, and she is the spirit of ayahuasca itself. And very frequently, most frequently of all, she takes the form of a gigantic snake, a serpent. Sometimes she takes the form of a human form as a beautiful woman, sometimes of a mass of serpents. She conveys messages to you, messages of deep concern with the environment, messages of the fragility of the planet on which we live, of the fragility of the human adventure on this planet. Everybody who drinks ayahuasca will meet this being and sense that we are dealing with a loving entity here which holds the planet in her coils and exists to protect and preserve this planet, but at the same time has the time to pay attention to individual human lives to enter into contact with individuals, to teach them. Professor Benny Shannon, he's the professor of psychology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Benny has drunk ayahuasca more than 300 times. That's a lot more than I've drunk